One of the most consumed beverages in the world is coffee. Breakfasts and after-dinner conversations wouldn't be complete without it. But in addition to being one of the most consumed beverages in the world, the origin of coffee is a story full of curiosities. Let's learn it together. This is Feedback Learnex, and my name is Juan Carlos. Let's go! The history of coffee begins in the Horn of Africa, in Ethiopia, around the 9th century. The geographic origin is known, the province of Kaffa, but not the exact moment when humans began to consume coffee beans, as there are no documents about it. Legend has it that a member of the Kaldi tribe, inhabitants of the high-altitude areas of Ethiopia, noticed that the goats had much more energy after eating a type of fruit similar to cherries. When they tried them themselves, they discovered their energizing and exciting properties and shared them with their tribe. Whether this legend about the origin of coffee is true or not, what is documented is that in the 15th century, there were coffee plantations in Yemen and a significant coffee trade between Sudan and Arabia through the Yemeni port of Mocha. This city, in addition to giving its name to a type of coffee and a coffee pot, was also the main port on the route to Mecca. It was where the first establishment serving coffee, called Kabe Kanes, appeared. These places soon became social and political activity centers and were even banned in several periods. Thus, the history of coffee and its spread throughout the world has Arabs as protagonists. For about 200 years, they had the exclusive right to cultivate and trade coffee, as they took special care not to propagate fertile coffee beans. They removed the outer layers and roasted them for commerce. Therefore, it was impossible to plant a coffee tree in territories not under Arab influence. Holland was responsible for starting coffee cultivation in Asia and parts of the Americas, which are currently the world's largest coffee producers. The Dutch were the first Europeans to obtain fertile seeds, bringing them to their country and cultivating them in a plant in a greenhouse in 1660. The climatic conditions in the Netherlands are not the most suitable for coffee cultivation, so they moved these seeds to other parts of the planet. Between the 17th and 18th century, coffee cultivation began in India, on the island of Java, in present-day Indonesia. They also brought coffee trees to the Dutch colony of Suriname and Brazil. The Dutch colonies were the major coffee suppliers to Europe in the 18th century. Venice also played a role in the history of coffee in Europe. If the Dutch were the first to obtain seeds for coffee cultivation, previously it was the Venetian merchants who first introduced the beverage to Europe in 1650 from Turkey. Within just 40 years, the first coffee house was created in London, and in 1689, the first coffee establishments appeared on the other side of the Atlantic, specifically in the city of Boston. In Spain, coffee cultivation started and still takes place with the only coffee production in all of Europe. Coffee plants grow in tropical and subtropical zones. In the Canary Islands have the ideal conditions for these crops. In Spain, coffee arrived with its expansion throughout Europe. In this case, it was Italian merchants from the Bourbons who brought it to our country in the mid-18th century. At this time, the first coffee houses in Madrid appeared, which were nothing more than food houses where this infusion was also served. But the history of coffee in Spain has two major peculiarities. The first is that the only coffee grown in all of Europe began to be cultivated and is still cultivated on Spanish territory. Coffee plants grow in tropical and subtropical areas, and the Canary Islands have the ideal conditions for these crops. Currently, Agave coffee is the only left in the Canary Islands, and therefore in Europe, with a small production of 1,500 kilograms annually. In Spain, a very particular roasting method appears, torrefacto. This technique consists of toasting the coffee with a portion of sugar that caramelizes and coats the beans. This helps to preserve the roasted coffee for much longer, although it gives a slightly different taste. The introduction of coffee in Mexico dates back to the early 19th century, in the state of Michoacán. It was introduced by Don Mariano Michelena, or in 1822 in Yautepec, Morelos, by Jaime Salvat. although there are versions that it was brought from Cuba by the Spaniard Antonio Salervet in 1784. We arrive at the 20th century. In 1900, the first roasted and vacuum-sealed coffee appeared, an invention of the American brand Hill Brothers. In 1901, a chemist of Japanese origin, Satoru Kato, created the first instant soluble coffee in the United States. And in 1938, Nestle introduced Nescafé, the best-selling instant coffee in the world. Currently, almost 10,000 tons of coffee are consumed annually worldwide, almost double that of 35 years ago. The biggest coffee consumers are, surprisingly, Nordic countries, with Finland at the top with 12 kilos per capita per year. It is followed by Norway, Sweden, and the Netherlands. Mexico ranks 11th, and Spain appears in the 19th position in the world consumption ranking, with 4.5 kilograms per person per year, just above the United States. Whether it's Americano, cappuccino, Turkish, cortado, mocha, espresso with milk, latte, no matter how you enjoy it, coffee has become a necessity in our lives. So let's enjoy it. How do you drink your coffee? Tell me in the comments below. This was Feedback Learnex. My name is Juan Carlos, and I'll talk to you next week.